Welcome to We Are Old, Get Over It, the podcast where we celebrate the wisdom of age and maybe a little grumbling too. Our guests dive into topics that matter most to us, from navigating the digital world to embracing new adventures and the challenges that hold us back. Join me for about 30 minutes of insightful conversations, honest reflections, and a whole lot of get over it attitude. So let's get started. Okay, welcome back to the podcast. Still working on our first season, and today we're going to discuss yoga for seniors. I have a couple of things you should probably be aware of. Did you know that falls are the leading cause of injury for older adults, and that yoga can help you prevent that? Many seniors believe that yoga is only for the young and the flexible, but that's far from the truth. Of course, you may not be able to get up, but after this session. But anyway, we're going to discuss that also. Today, we're diving into the world of yoga for seniors, exploring its incredible benefits and how it can be adapted for any age and ability. And I have to say that I have the director of postures in Naples, Florida, actually a very good friend of mine that I haven't spoken to in a long time. Her name is Suzie Muchnick, and she is going to be the guest that I'll be interviewing today. And she will take over the conversation, and I'll just intercede when I think I have to. So, Suzie, after we stopped laughing before this started, I'm going to turn this over to you so I can continue laughing about all the things we talked about that these people don't hear. Go ahead, Suzie.
Thanks, Ken, for having me. You know, when you called me and broached the subject of the podcast, you brought up this issue of falls. And, one of the mainstays of what we do in every class is work on balance. So, but when people think about balance, they think about, standing, walking, but you can learn to balance and learn to strengthen the muscles that are necessary to hold you up using props. And in Iyengar yoga, and as certified Iyengar yoga teachers, we're taught how to do that for people with injuries, people sometimes without limbs, people that can't get up and down from the floor in the beginning of the practice. And they learn to do that. They learn to know how to balance. They learn to detect their space, the space that they're in, whether they're sitting or standing, but also around them. Like when you get in and out of a car, how you balance yourself before you start walking away from the car. And just recently, interestingly enough, I was packing the trunk of my car, and there was a curb right behind me. But I had an awareness of that curb, so that when I stepped back, I still had a sense of being balanced as I was putting things into the car. So I become pretty alert about that. But it's something that I've heard over and over again from students and friends of mine who have older parents than we are, and fall, and it's horrible.
Right.
So we want to try to avoid those things.
It's almost a death sentence, unfortunately.
Frequently, that's the story that I hear, and I'm pretty sure it's avoidable. And so, but here's the thing: in order to, at certain ages, if you haven't been I don't like to use the word working out, but if you haven't been strengthening your muscles and continue to create a range of motion in your joints, when you start at the age of 70, and that can happen, you have to stick with it, because those muscles have never been developed for so many years. And it's becomes a life process. So a habit. And it has to be a habit. You may not have to do it every day, but you got to do it at least 3 to 4 times a week. And it doesn't have to be a long period of time, but you have to basically build up your muscles, do movements. We call it postures that will help flexibility, mobility, and stability. And
Let me
those
ask you
three
something.
things, those
Uh,
three things have to work in unison. It's, people say, oh, I'm very flexible. Yeah, but are you stable? And you could have joint problems. You could have arthritis, which makes moving sometimes very painful because of stiffness. What the yoga does, and it does do this, but you do have to do it, you have to practice, is it does create those ways to ameliorate what aging will do to us, and it'll do it to all of us, just at different times.
would you, uh, you mentioned a form of yoga, iyengar, I believe.
Iyengar.
I was close. For
Yeah,
me, that's
you were
pretty good.
close. It was in New York. There was a New York accent
It's a New
behind
York
it.
accent, exactly. Okay, so I'd like you to describe what that form of yoga is versus the other forms of yoga that people hear about, like hot yoga or whatever else is out there. Obviously, I don't know that much about it, but I did study the instructions that you do, so I have a little background on that, but it would be much better if you speak about it.
What I can't do, I can't really speak about hot yoga or these other forms of yoga. But what I can tell you is that they're all based on hatha yoga, on what is actually called Ashtanga yoga. And Ashta means 8 in Sanskrit, and Anga is limb. So it's the 8 limbs of yoga. And the first 2 limbs have to do with moral and ethical issues. And we do teach that in class by way of how we treat our own bodies and how we treat one another. We actually only practice the 3rd and 4th limb of yoga, which involves the physical postures and breathing. And what makes Iyengar yoga different is its precision, the beginning stages of learning therapeutic yoga, because it's within that framework of hatha yoga that we are able and somewhat certified to actually teach therapeutic yoga. So if somebody is going in for knee replacement, shoulder replacement, when the student tells me that, I want to build up that part of the body so that the musculature is stronger because when you have the surgery, you're tearing up the muscles, getting to the problem, fixing the problem, then the whole rebuild goes on again. So we do work before surgery, and then we do post-physical therapy. So when they go in for the surgery, then they, of course, would be going into physical therapy, and then they can re-enter, especially if they're students. And if they're longtime students, they can't wait to get back into the yoga class because they miss the practice. But basic things are the precision with which the poses are taught, the props, although I know all over town people are using props, but we're taught props almost from the very beginning. So
What
we
are
can,
props? What are props?
well, you could use a wall, but how
Okay.
do you have to know how to use it. Belts, but you have to know how to use it. Um, Bricks, blankets, because in the Iyengar yoga community, we teach inversions, that is headstand, shoulder stand, arm balance, in other words, standing on your hands. Even if somebody doesn't have the arm strength, we have ways of preparing them to, if they want to, go into a full arm balance, depending on their own condition. So those are the props that we use.
Mhm.
And lots of others. I mean, so many others that we use. Rope wall. There is no Iyengar yoga school. And in fact, I'm not even sure, I maybe could run around Naples and see what they have there. We always have a rope wall in the school. And students, practitioners, strong, dedicated practitioners, put them into their homes.
Oh, let me ask
That's
you another question about that. You're talking about people that come to your studio. What do you do for people that don't want to come to your studio? I know that you probably do Zoom calls with them. How does that work?
so actually, I think it works. I mean, my classes that I take, and I continue to take classes with senior teachers, it's mostly Zooming. And I think it's great. But a lot of the students, and most of the students that I had pre-COVID, which is when we started with Zoom, they've continued on Zoom. So it works out. Some students obviously don't have a rope wall. Some students don't even have enough space in their homes or apartments that is ideal for Zooming. But I've been doing it long enough now. I can tell a student, can you get to a different wall and have your camera face you here? If not, I can see a lot, even when it's not a profile or even if I can't see them straight on, which happens. But the students, there are some students that are older or students that have particular problems. Sometimes students that haven't really been practicing yoga, but they know they have scoliosis and they were introduced to yoga after they learned. I'm talking about after they were already quite mature, and they feel more comfortable being in an in-person place. But likely those people don't have the props they need at home to continue to practice.
I see. Let me ask you a couple of other things. We talked a little bit about the physical benefits. Are there any other physical benefits that you see in yoga? And then I wanted to move on to the mental and emotional benefits, especially as you're older.
So, well, there are lots of surveys, but there's actually some scientific research that indicates how useful and helpful the practice of yoga is, especially people that are going through cancer. And I've worked with breast cancer survivors. And one of the biggest pluses is their ability to move, do things that they didn't think they could do again. And they actually, not only on the physical end, although physically when you're moving around, you just naturally feel better. And they feel better being able to come back to a yoga practice, even if it's somewhat modified. So there's this sense of well-being that happens. And I think most students that walk out of yoga class are going to feel that, even if they come into the yoga class with a bad attitude. Maybe they did something before they came to yoga or had an argument with somebody before they came to class. They come out of class and they're calmer. They feel better. Is that what you're asking about?
Sure, that's part of it. Also, I think that common concerns might be, and I'm just picking this up, that some seniors worry about being too inflexible.
Mm-hmm.
But yoga meets you where you are. Is that correct? Is that a good way to put
Absolutely.
it?
Yeah, it is. But then that gets back to the props.
Right.
So let's say you're back, and I work with a number of students that have a variety of different spines. Some of them have a scoliosis. Some of them have a kyphosis, where the shoulders, this is common as people get older, they sit around a lot. Their shoulders come forward,
Hmm.
their chests drop. And this also has an effect on your emotions when your body is kind of curled in on itself.
You mean like
Breathing,
you mean
yeah.
like squeezing your
Yeah,
shoulders
the
in,
chest drops back, the
right?
upper back is humped, and breathing becomes an issue. And You don't want breathing to be an issue. I mean, you lose your breath, you're pretty much out. That's the end of it. So we teach how to open up the chest, even if it's just in that class where we're using props to keep the shoulders back, to keep the upper back lifted. Sometimes students, they can't even, they think they are opening their chest. But in order to open the chest, you want to feel that the upper back is part of that. It's not just a front back. We are multidimensional. We're not just like a flat board. So when we're working to not only increase circulation, but increase the capacity to breathe. So,
Ask
but
another question.
it's vast. It's vast, Ken. You know, it's a hard thing to say. Well, I can say, well, one of the big things about Iyengar yoga is that we don't give up. As teachers, we don't give up. If this doesn't work for a student, we'll try another method. If this doesn't work, we'll try another method. If they can't do this, we have a variety of, I like to call it, the tricks in the bag. So we'll pull another one out. And finally, one will really resonate with a student. And then I'll say, okay, that's what you're going to continue to work on until we get really good at that.
Let me ask you this. One of the things is, now you live in a fairly well-populated area, and there are a lot of people that have signs up that and things on the internet that say they do yoga. How do you pick a qualified instructor?
Yeah, well, see, then I'm a little bit prejudiced when it comes to that. However, I've learned recently that students of yoga, practitioners of yoga, it's different. Like, I know a lot of people that say, oh, I do yoga. Iyengar students study it. So a teacher of yoga, it's a problem, and one that our association, the Iyengar Association, has dealt with. Because, Ken, I don't know how much yoga you've done, but you could go to a facility where they're giving a 200-hour certification, which is not a certification. You get registered with a facility called Yoga Alliance. It's just a money thing. And you could be very ambitious. You could be really great at marketing, and you can open up a yoga school.
There's no
They need
state
to be
licensing for
qualified.
that? Is there state
Well,
licensing?
there isn't.
No. Interesting.
There is not. So you have to, a lot of people, will tell me, because I want to understand, like, usually young people, I could be wrong about this, young people gravitate to things like hot yoga, where the only thing I know about it is that they pump a lot of heat into the school, and then you're doing things where there's a lot of sweating. And I kind of remember what that feels like. And still now, in some of the classes that I have taken, I just recently took a workshop in person. There was a little bit of sweating. That's a great feeling, because you kind of emitting a lot of toxicity that might be in your body. But that kind of yoga is not going to work for a person that has arthritis, scoliosis, lordosis, knee replacement, a shoulder replacement. That's going to be a problem for them. You have to ask, how long have you been practicing? What type of yoga have you been practicing? Some people, they don't even know. Iyengar yoga has been in existence way longer than a lot of other. Hatha yoga is what we teach, and that's what they're teaching. You have to ask. Where did you practice? Where did you start learning yoga? Do you read the Yoga Sutras? Do you know about the first two limbs of yoga? Do you for us, Iyengar yoga students and teachers, BKS Iyengar, he did not teach meditation. until almost the last years of his life, and he lived into his 90s. It wasn't until his daughter started teaching, and it was towards the end of her life, that they included that limb of yoga, which goes much further. It's, there are 8 limbs. I'm telling you, most people only know about those 2 limbs: physical postures and breathing. And Iyengar yoga teachers, we teach the techniques of breathing. And I don't know if other forms of yoga do.
That's fine. Okay, let's talk about somebody who wants to be social. It's a way to socialize with other people. And I always try to stress the fact that socialization is very important for older people in particular. We can get lonely real easily. Um, what about consulting with a doctor before they consider yoga? Some people might be concerned, should I do this? Am I going to get hurt? What do you think about that?
You can get hurt bending over and gardening.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always that possibility that a person can get hurt. If they have they should. If they have a cardio issue, they should get checked out. Unfortunately, most doctors don't know about yoga. They just know about what they read. There aren't that many doctors that are practicing yoga. So yeah, of course, I always ask somebody, especially if they've come out of some sort of surgery or therapy, have you gotten the okay to now proceed with a yoga practice?
Well, is yoga kind of like like PT to that degree, where you actually talk to people, and based on what you just described, where people are suffering or just had surgery, you can focus on that because your main focus is really making sure that they're stable
and
and they're
safe
flexible and safe.
and safe
Exactly.
and safe. Not so much flexibility. There are different grades in flexibility, and I give you an example. So I recently had some deterioration in my shoulder, and my doctor wanted to send me to the orthopedic surgeon, and I said, no, we're going to go to physical therapy first. So with the physical therapy, I started getting stronger because there were tears in my shoulder, and I wanted to strengthen that area. The physical therapist was completely cool with that. It's worked. And in the meanwhile, I decided I'm going to just also do strength training, because there were some things that I couldn't do because of the injury, even in the yoga, because I was getting pained. So I started to do that. So the personal trainer, he's having me do something, and I go, do you really think you need to spend time with me in flexibility? Because he wanted to teach me flexibility. So he's bending over from a standing position. He's bending his knees, and he's humping his back. And he says, when was the last time you did this? I said, I never do that. And I folded over from my hips, almost like folded over. But it's not important in the normal scheme of things as we age to be that flexible.
Yeah.
But it is important that when you're doing physical things, whether it's gardening or yoga or hanging a picture or reaching over something, to know where you are in space and what you're doing with your hips and your spine and legs. Because you should be able to at least bend halfway over, like be in an L shape, and have both of your legs absolutely stretched, and the quadriceps, the front thighs lifted, the back thighs, the hamstrings lifted, the buttocks descended so that there are no attachment problems. Because a lot of people that are very flexible naturally, they ultimately tear out those attachments because they're so flexible, but not as strong and not as stable as they are flexible. So yeah, that flexibility thing is not like a key factor. It's part of the things we start. And that's, by the way, that's called what we call forward extension, not downward bending. That's a different headset when you think, oh, you're moving forward. Well, now we're talking about physics. If something is moving forward, something better be moving back. Otherwise, you're going to fall on your head. And that's another way of understanding where you are in space. So somebody that's just coming, not very flexible, we have their hands going into a wall. Work on stretching and strengthening your arms, stretching and strengthening the legs and the thighs. Not feeling, you're going to feel some stretch in the lower back. You're going to feel stretch in the back of the body, but shouldn't be pain.
Let me ask you something else, Suzie.
You're
I know
asking me
you're
a lot of
concerned.
questions, Ken.
What's that? I ask a
You're
lot of
asking me a lot
questions.
of questions.
That's my job. I
Yeah,
have to ask
okay.
questions. You're
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
expert. I just ask questions.
I'm a
I have
practitioner.
I
I
have
don't
the
know if
hard
I'm an
part.
expert. The hard
Okay.
part.
Anyway, I'm going to lose my train of thought, but I'm going to
Sorry.
come back to it right now. Okay. So when we first started speaking about this, we were both concerned about the same thing, falling. Okay. So how about some tips for seniors who aren't taking yoga? How do they frickin' fall?
Mhm. Even if I tell people how to fall, if their muscles, if their hands are weak or deformed, that's going to be an ongoing issue until they get stronger. Because a lot of the students I have problems with their hands. And their fingers have already deformed from arthritis. And if you're going to fall, the likelihood is you're going to, well, that's not so bad. That might feel bad,
I
but
just gave
that's
her the
not,
finger, but it wasn't that
yeah,
kind of a
wasn't that
finger.
right. But no, worse, where, where you'll see the thumb is like this and there's tremendous deformity. Like if you fall like that, you're going to break something. So what we try to do is we always work on over and over again. In fact, downward facing dog pose, which is like a mainstay in all of yoga, we emphasize how the hand is on the floor, how the feet are on the floor, that there should be an equal amount of weight as best as you can, not just in your arms, but in your legs. How do you fall?
Exactly. How do you fall?
You have to, this is what I've been saying. You have
Right.
to prepare your body. You have to create a habit. You wake up in the morning, you go to the bathroom, you just do that. It's natural. It's a habit. You brush your teeth. Would you think about walking out of the house without brushing your teeth? Maybe some people would, but if I ask you that question, the likelihood is no. Well, you also have to do a practice to strengthen your arms, strengthen your legs, stretch your back. All those things. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but you have to do it. Otherwise, you're not preparing for the inevitable accident.
Yeah, because we all fall. I mean, it could happen anywhere. You step off a curb,
Yeah. Well, you can slip,
you could slip.
slip out. So you might think, oh, well, I'm slipping and I'm falling forward, but you could slip and fall sideways. You can slip and think you're catching yourself and fall backwards. And those are accidents. But those things, if you have a certain amount of musculature and if you are more mobile, at least the recovery from a fall like that is not as bad as it would be. You can maybe avoid the hospital.
So if you're having a fall, it's kind of a natural thing to stiffen up.
Yeah.
But I would think that it's better. I had a fall last year and I realized what was happening.
And you just let go.
And what I did is I just relaxed.
You just let go.
I let go. Yeah, that's a better
But
way to.
you're talking about somebody that has a wherewithal of what is happening.
Yeah.
And again, you get back to an aging. If somebody is 90, maybe they don't have, because they haven't been doing this. See, the thing with the yoga is if you are a yoga practitioner, abhyasa is called, if you're a yoga practitioner, you continue this throughout your life and you're doing it practically every day. So all of these neurons that are being inflicted upon through physical movement, you have a different sense of where you are in space, where you are within your own self. It's a learning process. You're learning about yourself through the years of practicing. Oh, we'll be doing something and oh, I never heard that before. You may have been said to you, but you may not have heard it, and now you're getting it. But you won't get it if you practice yoga 40 years ago. Oh, I took some yoga for 2 years, and you're not doing it anymore. Forget about it. It's an ongoing practice.
It's a lifelong practice, is what
It
you're
has
saying.
to be, and
What about?
it.
I'm sorry. What about breathing? How people breathe and so on? Is that? I sense that it's very important in
It is.
yoga of
It's
how
not
you
just
breathe.
important. It's not just important in yoga. It's important. What we do is we teach people, how does it feel when you haven't done anything, you're just lying flat on your back or maybe with a prop underneath you, and you're breathing for 5 minutes and you're calming yourself down and you're just breathing in and out. You have to learn how that feels to you, because you get under stress, any kind of stress, like the stress I was under because I couldn't get on the podcast.
No, not you. I
Yeah.
could see you
No,
were
I was
breathing.
so
I
no,
could
I
watch you while you were
was.
going through
I
the
was, but I could also feel, Ken, that this was stressing me. So my body just I go into a normal, I switch. I'm listening to my breath. I'm using the breath to calm down what I physically feel.
Mhm. So
But
yoga
most
will definitely
people,
help you with stress, obviously.
obviously,
Mhm.
but it doesn't happen. It's not like you walk in, you get a shot, and it's all better.
It's a
It's a
lifelong thing.
practice. It's a
It's lifelong
practice.
practice, right?
Totally.
Hmm.
Someone
Do you have a
recently,
good story for me? A good story about good
yeah.
experiences that you've had recently with some of your I kn with some of your older, students? And I understand from our earlier discussion before we went on this interview that you have an older base of clientele.
I can't, there have been too many. I can't pull up one in particular, but there have been so many students with hip replacements that have come back to class and come back to almost a full their yoga practice prior to surgery. Same thing. We go a little bit further. uh, Iyengar yoga teachers at a certain level go a little bit further than physical therapy. The physical therapy takes you past the pain of surgery and up to a certain mobility. Unfortunately, this is what we're finding, that they're not, or the student is not paying attention to how when they've had work on one side of their body, the other side of their body is kind of taking over. And this creates an unevenness and
Uh, a imbalance,
asymmetry, yeah,
an
in the
imbalance
body.
on your
And so
structure.
coming back to yoga,
Mhm,
it could get pointed out. They already know it. They already know it, but they don't understand what they're doing, and we can see it.
mhm.
And so we do that, and it can be frustrating because it means further work on the side of the body that's been replaced. Not so much pain, but working towards an evenness. And the yoga poses, most of the yoga standing poses are asymmetrical. And they're asymmetrical just for that reason. Because on one side of the body, why are you doing it this way? You should be doing it the same way on this other side. And there come in the props. I can't think of
It's all
of a
about
particular,
balancing. It's all about balance.
yeah.
Hmm.
Right off the top of my head, I can't. I mean, lots of students have given me credit for all kinds of things. And I tell them, it isn't me. It is the yoga.
So, for example, if somebody wanted to participate with you in a class that was a Zoom class because they're somewhere else in the country, but they happen to like you. I mean, I like you, but I can still see you. That's the difference. We don't see each other too often. But how would they contact you? They would go to your website, the one
Yeah.
that I mentioned before,
Yeah, they could go to the website and email me and
which is
see if
postures.com.
postures.com. Right.
Okay. That's a good name, by the way.
Thank you very much.
And you can take how long are the Zoom classes usually?
Hour and a half.
An hour and a half.
But an hour and a half, that shouldn't frighten people in terms of ability. It's all paced. And for my classes since COVID, the first 15 minutes we work on breathing, not pranayama, which is different. Pranayama is the practice, the study of techniques of breathing, but just normal breathing. So again, they get in touch with their organs of perception, their eyes, their ears, their tongue, their skin, sensations, and we wake them up. And then we go on and we start out. Nothing, you're not pushed. You can do as much as you can, come down. Some of the students, because these are all general classes, these are not necessarily beginner classes. There are classes that are just chair classes. And if those students need that, then they work in a chair. And I can guide them while they're in a chair. If they can't hold poses, they can come out of the pose and then go back into the pose so that they repeat to learn how to do the pose. And that's what they would do on Zoom.
I see. Okay. Any last thing you want to say before I shorten this up to the end? No. You're not going to make a
No.
joke about me? Okay, good. Well,
really, Ken, you might want to try a Zoom class. You can get
I will
Peggy
be
into
laughing
one.
too hard. I would rather
No,
come to your
but
studio.
we laugh in class.
I would rather come to your studio so you can make more fun of me when I scream and carry on and when you're trying to be serious, I'm not going to be serious.
Only Wednesday.
Only Wednesdays. Okay. Well, I don't know if you remember this, but I like to read a quote at the end of each podcast. I try to get something that relates to the subject. So I have a quote by Albert Einstein. I don't know how the hell this relates, but I figure it does. It's in my mind. And here's what the quote is. Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. And I think that that's basically what you're saying. Don't shake your head. Just answer me.
Me and Einstein. What a great That's great. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
What a compliment.
It's my pleasure. I'd like to thank you again for spending some time with me. And I look forward to seeing you because we haven't seen each other for many years.
Too long.
We both look a little different than we looked last time we met each other. And I just want to I want to thank the audience for listening to our podcast today. And remember that we also have a blog of this podcast on our website, which is weareoldpodcast.com. And the blog will be there, as well as if you want to see or listen to the podcast again, it'll be listed up there. And the information, is it okay for me to list postures.com on our website? So we'll have that information there. And again, Suzie, I've known you for a long time. I want to thank you for putting up with me for all the years you put up.
My pleasure, Ken.
Okay, my darling. Thank you very much. All right.
Speak to you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
And that concludes this episode of We Are Old, Get Over It. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found our conversation both insightful and entertaining. Remember, age is a journey, not a destination. So embrace the wrinkles, the forgetfulness, and the occasional tech frustrations with a good dose of get over it attitude. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep getting over it. Ken out.